Over 40,000 war crimes Russia has committed in Ukraine since the beginning of the full-scale invasion. These are atrocities that have been confirmed and reported to the Ministry of Internal Affairs of Ukraine. Yet the information about Russia's crimes in the temporarily occupied Ukrainian territories remains unknown. So the real numbers might be larger. Russia justifies its aggression by means of propaganda. Narrative 1. Ukraine attacks itself and kills civilians. This is a well-known way used by Russians to wash the blood of their hands. They blame Ukrainians for allegedly committing war crimes in their own territory.
Ukraine attacks consulate of Sweden. Ukraine attacks Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. Ukraine attacks Donetsk with shells of NATO caliber.
By following this narrative, Russian media Federal Press has published a story stating that the special services of Ukraine allegedly opened the graves in Kharkiv Oblast and uglified the bodies.
The Russian Ministry of Defense has warned of a new large-scale anti-Russian provocation prepared by the Ukrainian special services to convince the West of the need to support the Kyiv regime.
Russian media also state that graves were excavated in Kozachya Lopань, Великий Бурлук, Shipovate and Khatne. The exhumation of those killed as a result of Russian aggression and the recording of Russia's war crimes are indeed continuing in Kharkiv Oblast, the National Police of Ukraine reports. These mass graves are not the only ones in the region. In fact, on September the 15th, 2022, several mass graves, including one site containing at least 440 bodies, were found in woods near the Ukrainian city of Izum after it was recaptured by Ukrainian forces. The graves contained bodies of people who were killed by Russian forces. Meanwhile, Russian propaganda systematically manipulates the theme of the inviolability and sanctity of graves. Another fake Russia has distributed this week is that the armed forces of Ukraine allegedly attacked the residential building in Dnipro, killing over 40 civilians.
Ukraine's air defense bombs high-story building in Dnipro, a base left instead of entrance.
After every attack on civilian infrastructure objects, Russian propagandists blame it on allegedly unsuccessful launches of Ukrainian anti-aircraft missiles. As in previous cases, this version has no basis.
The approximate launch location, altitude and flight speed were detected by radar means there is no doubt that it was the Ha-22 missile.
Narrative 2. Russia fights collective West, not Ukraine. This is a recurring disinformation narrative from pro-Kremlin outlets claiming that the West and NATO in particular are directly involved in Russia's war against Ukraine. It is very difficult for Russian government to explain to its population and the whole world why the so-called Second Army cannot get the victory against Ukraine. So that is why Kremlin says that Russia fights not with Ukraine, but with the entire NATO.
The authorities of the Kyiv regime carefully hide their military losses, which in fact are huge and incomprehensible. This recognition was made in an interview with Newsweek by Ukraine's ambassador to the UK, Vadim Prystaiko, who previously served as Minister of Foreign Affairs.
Newsweek published an interview with the Ukrainian ambassador on January the 7th, 2023. Vadim Prystaiko did talk about Ukrainian losses, but he discussed general losses, that is, both among civilians and military.
Vadim Prystaiko, Ukraine's ambassador to the UK. We are losing people left and right. We are not told how many of these dead are military or civilian, but you can imagine that the numbers are huge, unfathomable, and cities, some of them completely destroyed.
Following the narrative about Russia fighting collective West, Russian state-controlled media Russia Today has published news stating that the United States of America start participating in the war by teaching Ukrainian servicemen how to use Patriot air defense systems.
Training in the United States of the Ukrainian military to operate the Patriot air defense system indicates the actual participation of Washington in the conflict in Ukraine. This was stated by the Russian ambassador to the United States, Anatoly Antonov. This is how he commented on the Pentagon's message that from 90 to 100 Ukrainian soldiers will be trained at the American military base Fort Sill in a few months to form Patriot crews.
Earlier in December, Vedant Patel, principal deputy spokesperson at U.S. Department of State, said that the U.S. is not and has never been at war with Russia.
Vedant Patel, a principal deputy spokesperson at U.S. Department of State on December 17. We're doing exactly what President of the USA Joe Biden told President of Russia Vladimir Putin. If Russia attacks Ukraine, we will provide security assistance so that Ukraine can defend itself, its sovereignty and territorial integrity.
Narrative 3. Ukraine wants to continue war. Viktor Medvedchuk, a pro-Russian politician whose daughter's godfather is Russian President Vladimir Putin, wrote an article about the war in Ukraine. Obviously, Medvedchuk blamed the collective West for everything that happened and advocated for taking Russian interests into account.
Perhaps Ukrainians need to start building their democracy and open their civil dialogue without Western overseas, whose management is harmful and disastrous, to save their country. If the West does not want to listen to the point of view of the rest of Ukraine, then that is its business. But for Ukraine, this perspective is important and necessary. Otherwise, this nightmare will never end.
Accused of treason, Ukrainian businessman and pro-Russian politician Viktor Medvedchuk was taken to Russia in exchange for 200 Ukrainian defenders.
The defeat of the military campaign forces the Kremlin to once again try to shake Ukraine from the inside. And the former Ukrainian People's Deputy, freed on Putin's personal instructions, is like no other suitable for this informational attack on the consciousness of Russians and Ukrainians who still trust Russian information sources. After all, the Kremlin did not abandon its plans to establish a pro-Russian government in Kyiv with the participation or under the leadership of Medvedchuk.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Latest news, trends, and analytics on all about Ukraine. Like, share, and subscribe. Any questions, proposals, and comments, contact us via email.